Hello internet, how's it going? I'm your host Jack Finch, right here on Most Amazing Top 5, bringing you the scariest stories of inmates who have actually escaped from maximum security prison. Now before we start, make sure you hit that subscribe button and leave a comment in the box down below to let us know what you'd like to see more of. Now in the movies, a prison break is seen as a daring, edge of your seat kind of adventure, but in reality it's usually down to some pretty severe brute force violence, a little lapse in concentration, or just plain old luck. There's a reason that most of these daring escapees have been locked behind bars, and that's generally because they've committed some incredibly heinous crimes. So, starting us off at number 5, we have the Texas 7. Hailed as the biggest prison escape in Texan history, the famed escape happened in December of 2000, when 7 inmates forced their way out of maximum security prison, John B. Connolly Unit, in the isolated Texas town of Kennedy. The escape was led by George Rivas, who was 30 at the time and serving 18 consecutive life sentences for burglary and kidnapping. 2 of the group were also convicted murderers. The Texas 7 began their prison break by overpowering 2 guards and 8 maintenance men, stealing their clothes and the keys to a truck after locking them in a utility closet. They then fooled several other guards in a watchtower to hand over a cache of weapons before tying them up and fleeing the prison in a truck. The infamous group then went on a day-long crime spree from San Antonio to Dallas and then to Colorado, where they were eventually captured. Sadly though, not before killing 29-year-old police officer Aubrey Hawkins, who bravely attempted to apprehend the group. The Texas 7 were eventually captured and secured back into the prison system. At number 4, we have the story of an escape at the Everglades Correctional Institute in Florida. Now, there's nothing stronger than a mother's love for her child, especially if that child is sentenced to serve 20 years in jail for armed robbery. Jr Sigler, who was 31 at the time, had already served 8 years of hard time before the events took place, but his mother, 58-year-old Sandra Sigler, was hatching a plan that would reunite the pair without the consent of the local law. The prison, spread over almost 100 acres of coral rock, was designed to be one of the most secure and advanced in the state, with concrete slab cell blocks, buried motion sensors, and multiple chain link fences. Sandra, along with 2 accomplices, set into motion a plan that would see her son home, and she did just that. The group got hold of a big rig tractor, and during broad daylight they plowed through the prison's front gates, as well as multiple maximum security razor-topped fences. Sandra followed close behind in an Oldsmobile Cutlass Supreme, and when the assailants reached the prison unit, they then had a gunfight with guards whilst waiting for Jr to make his break. The plan worked, and they roared out of the complex into the streets of southwest Miami. Sandra and her accomplices were swiftly caught, but Jr Sigler soon disappeared into the Florida swamps and Everglades. He was later captured, but the daring escape deeply shocked the Sunshine State. Coming in at number 3, we have a story all the way from Vologda in Russia. Alexi Sheskatov had been sentenced to 24 years in prison for the murder of 8 people. The prison in Vologda is located roughly 500 kilometers north of Moscow and is pretty isolated from the rest of the country. Now, it's important to note, at the time of his escape, Alexei had served roughly half of his term. He'd spent nearly 12 years in a pretty desolate, isolated prison. So, no one expected what happened next. During exercise time in the prison yard, guards and prisoners alike were perplexed at the sight of a helicopter hovering above their heads. The chopper quickly descended and Alexei made his dash, grabbing a rope ladder that was thrown from above. The prisoner clung on for his life, and the helicopter swooped away out into the Russian wilderness. It all happened so fast that the guards didn't even have time to react. Alexei and his accomplices left the helicopter, as well as the pilot, who they had bound and gagged on the northern edges of Vologda. His escape was short-lived though, after police quickly found the group, and Alexei was wounded in the exchange of gunfire. The court added 12 years to his prison term, where he still remains to this day. Bringing it in at number 2, we have the explosive tale of French gangster Antonio Ferreira. Antonio's criminal career is something straight out of a Tarantino movie. He was part of a group of incredibly successful bank robbers who had nicknamed themselves the Dream Team. At the time, they were labelled the most dangerous gang in Europe by Interpol. Antonio was particularly famous in the French underworld for his uncanny ability to create the perfect explosive device that would blow open a safe but leave the cash completely unharmed. At the tender age of 29, Antonio was finally caught and sentenced to serve an 8-year prison term for 2 armed robberies, as well as being the key suspect for at least 15 more. Well, 5 years into his prison career, the explosive expert decided that he'd had just about enough and hatched a plan to escape the French prison. At 4:30 a.m. on a March morning in 2003, 6 men drove up to the front gates in fake police cars, clothed in police uniforms and ski masks. Check this, they blew up the gates with rocket-propelled grenade launchers. During the commotion, Antonio blew up his own cell door with a stick of dynamite believed to have been given to him by one of the prison guards. Once out, he joined up with the gang and fled. The whole thing took 10 minutes. Antonio was on the loose for a staggering 4 months and was declared France's most wanted man by then-President Nicolas Sarkozy. He was later recaptured after the efforts of a massive undercover operation at a bar in Paris. As the arresting officer slapped on the cuffs, he was quoted as saying just one thing: "You again." And finally, coming in at number 1, we have a story that is equally scary to both its prisoners as well as the general public. When you think prison escape, you think Alcatraz, the infamous San Francisco prison that has been hailed as the most impossible prison to escape in the world. Built on an actual rock, Alcatraz had some insane security policies. Rows and rows of iron grates, 12 cell checks per day, and the fact that the prison itself was surrounded by the ice-cold waters of the Pacific. 4 men were brave enough to make the attempt, and on June 11th, 1962, after weeks of meticulous planning, Frank Morris and brothers Clarence and John Anglin decided they had just about enough of being locked behind bars. After leaving Alan West behind, their other co-conspirator, the trio scaled 30 feet of plumbing to the prison roof, where they also plunged a further 50 feet of piping to the shore below. Now, everyone who had attempted to escape Alcatraz before had ended up dead, their bodies washed up on the shores of San Francisco Bay. But the bodies of Morris and the Anglins were never found, with many believing that they actually made it to freedom, and who knows, they could still be roaming around freely to this very day. That's all we've got time for today, folks. We hope you've enjoyed this video. Make sure to hit that subscribe button and leave a comment in the box down below. Until next time, I've been your host, Jack Finch. Take it easy.